For more than 2 centuries, the White House has stood as the most recognizable home in America. Behind the bright white pillars and manicured lawns lies a story of tragedy, changing tastes, and hidden features. Presidents have added, demolished, and reinvented it to suit their own visions. From horse stables to the Lincoln bedroom, every renovation tells a different chapter of American history. What were the leaders of our country thinking? What do they value? Be sure to stick around for the last one, because if you haven't heard by now, Trump ordered an entire wing torn down. The President's House. In 1792, Washington, D.C. was mainly swampy and dry riverbanks and ambition just off the Potomac River. Architect James Hoban, an Irish immigrant, won the competition to design the President's House. It wasn't called the White House back then. Enslaved laborers, freed black craftsmen, European stonecutters built its sandstone walls by hand. It took 8 years to complete. When President John Adams moved in 1800, it was bare, undecorated, and freezing. Abigail Adams hung laundry in the East Room because it was so drafty. There was no landlord to call and make things work. There was no heat or running water, just a lot of hope that this young republic would figure things out. What stood at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue was still potential, but with a fierce spirit.
That Hoban's vision for that building wouldn't have been possible without the labor of enslaved and free African Americans, immigrant laborers, and skilled craftsmen, both from Europe and the United States.
Up in flames. Quick, if your house caught on fire, what is the first thing you'd save? In August 1814, British troops invaded Washington, D.C., setting fire to nearly every government building, including the President's House. Flames gutted the structure. Woodwork, furniture, and history turned to ash. First Lady Dolly Madison famously rescued a portrait of George Washington before escaping, one of the few national treasures that survived. Only the sandstone ruins stood, blackened and cracked by the heat. Architect James Hoban returned to rebuild it almost exactly as before. To hide the scorch marks, the new exterior was painted white. 3 years later, President James Monroe moved in. The same walls that saw destruction now stood for resilience. Who doesn't love a great comeback story?
The place had just been constructed only 12 years before, but it had to be rebuilt soon after this disastrous war. The president turned tail and ran like a raggedy clown when General Ross burned the White House down.
Horsepower. The president has to be able to get around, and horse-drawn carriages were the way to go in the 19th century. They were kept in stables. Their locations changed multiple times throughout this period. The stables were first built in 1800 on the northeast portion of what is now the Treasury Department complex. It housed as many as 16 horses. There was a brick structure that was torn down and replaced with a new one. That eventually was lost to a fire in 1857, and the replacement was built on the west grounds in 1864. By 1902, automobiles replaced horses. The stables became obsolete, and President Theodore Roosevelt ordered them demolished to clear ground for the new West Wing. The horses were relocated to military facilities, where they joined ceremonial units.
One of the longest-serving White House coachmen was Albert Hawkins, who joined President Ulysses S. Grant's White House staff in 1869. For this role, Hawkins became one of the most prominent black men in Washington, D.C., so much so that one journalist wrote, "Probably no man of his race, except Frederick Douglass, personally knew so many presidents and public men as Albert Hawkins."
The Invisibles. Hidden beneath the grand rooms of the White House was an entirely different world. A maze of kitchens, laundry rooms, wine cellars, and servants' quarters that kept the mansion running. In the earliest years, many of the cooks and houseworkers were enslaved people who lived and worked below the stairs, preparing elaborate meals over wood fires in sweltering heat. Later generations of free staff and hired help continued the same traditions, some serving across multiple presidencies. At least 7 presidents relied on slave labor in the White House. When Theodore Roosevelt remodeled in 1902, those cramped quarters were torn out to make room for storage and mechanical systems. Today, nothing remains except what's written in these books. the people whose unseen hands kept the White House functioning and steady for generations.
I wake up every morning in a house that was built by slaves.
Glasshouse Palace. Long before the West Wing ever existed, the west side of the White House shimmered beneath glass and sunlight. For a president known more for duels than gardening, Andrew Jackson built a modest orangery where citrus trees thrived through mid-Atlantic winters. 2 decades later, President Franklin Pierce expanded it into a greenhouse. But tragedy struck in 1867 when the wooden conservatory burned to the ground, destroying decades of rare plants. President Ulysses S. Grant rebuilt it with glass and iron, and it was twice the size of the original. It was a sparkling glasshouse palace where foreign dignitaries marveled and first ladies hosted teas. During Abraham Lincoln's presidency, rumors swirled of a flirtation between Mary Todd Lincoln and one of the gardeners. By the 1890s, the conservatory was tended by 8 gardeners. Theodore Roosevelt, craving office space and renovation, tore it all down in 1902 to create the West Wing, along with the Colonial Garden, which Ellen Wilson, wife of Woodrow Wilson, turned into the Rose Garden.
Orchids are unique because it used to be really only the wealthy had the ability to raise orchids. Now with the way that we plant and transplant these plants, anybody can really do them.
Tiffany. Have you ever set foot in a centuries-old church and been awed by its stained glass windows and artwork? For a very brief moment, the Executive House, as it was called, did have a stained glass screen that gleamed like gems in a jewel box. In 1882, President Chester Arthur had the entrance hall decorated in excessive Victorian style. He commissioned New York City jeweler Charles Tiffany's son, Louis Comfort Tiffany, yes, that Tiffany, to create an elaborate $15,000 stained glass screen, which is almost $500,000 today. Tiffany also designed other rooms in the mansion. When Theodore Roosevelt took office nearly 20 years later in 1901, he made the White House name official. When he walked into the entrance hall, he found the Victorian style distasteful and ordered that all of it be removed in favor of simple, clean, and stately marble. Tiffany's screen was auctioned off as boxes of glass for only $275. Parts were installed in the Belvedere Hotel at Chesapeake Beach, Maryland, but sadly the hotel was destroyed by fire in 1923.
Tiffany was inspired by ancient Roman and Syrian glass, which had this iridescent finish when it was dug up. At the same time, he wanted to create these startling, modern objects.
Let there be light. Can you imagine living in a time when there was no electricity? In 1891, Benjamin Harrison was president when the Edison Electric Company installed the first electrical wiring in the Executive Mansion. The system ran from a nearby generator housed in the State, War, and Navy building with wires strung across the lawn. Electricity replaced gas lamps, which had smoked the ceilings and scorched the walls for decades. When the lights were on, the Harrisons refused to touch the switches, fearing electrocution. Servants turned the lights on and off, sometimes with sticks. Their caution wasn't foolish. Early wiring was crude, insulation was thin, and sparks were common. In fact, a wiring short later caused the 1929 West Wing fire that gutted the Oval Office. One of Edison's young electricians, Ike Hoover, supervised the installation and later received a full-time job offer. He agreed to a low-paying job as an electrician and worked his way up to the White House's chief usher, serving every president from Harrison to Franklin Roosevelt. A 42-year career.
It's a great story. I had a lot of fun illustrating this story. It's a story about a young gentleman by the name of Ike Hoover who wired the White House for the first time in 1890.
The Penthouse. Have you ever had water damage in your house? Perhaps a leaky roof? Even the White House was not immune. Growing tired of catching rainwater with pans in the attic during the 1920s, President Calvin Coolidge ordered the entire roof removed and replaced with a new third floor. The addition included 18 guest and service rooms and a sunroom called the solarium. While this drastic renovation was taking place, a 6-month project, the Coolidge family lived up the street at the Patterson Mansion on DuPont Circle. It wasn't until 20 years later that engineers realized the added weight of the third-floor addition built on top of the brick and mortar made the walls and ceilings below dangerously unstable. In 1948, President Harry Truman immediately ordered the gutting and rebuilding of the entire interior, replacing it with a steel frame, which we'll talk about more later. Since then, the third floor has served as the first family's private realm. There's a game room, the Empire guest room, and a soundproof music room for Bill Clinton's saxophone playing. Michelle Obama's mother, Marion Robinson, lived there. Take a dip. You might expect a mansion such as the White House to have an indoor pool. If you get an opportunity to visit, you won't see it, but it's there. When Franklin D. Roosevelt became president in 1933, his friends and supporters presented him with an indoor pool. It wasn't to make the White House more luxurious. FDR struggled with the debilitating disease called polio. Swimming was one of the few exercises that eased his pain, so an indoor swimming pool was built inside the West Wing north of the Oval Office. The pool was 50 feet long by 20 feet wide and 9 feet deep. It was a private refuge where FDR could move freely and escape the strain of the position, especially because he was the longest-serving U.S. president with 3 terms. The expanding press corps of the late 1960s needed space closer to the Oval Office. Previously, reporters had congregated at various locations around the White House. In 1970, Richard Nixon had the pool covered over and replaced it with the James S. Brady Press Briefing Room. Yes, every time you see the press secretary facing a horde of reporters and cameras, they're standing on top of FDR's empty pool.
It's frankly ridiculous that anyone in this room would even suggest that President Trump is doing anything for his own benefit.
That's all he's doing!
The bunker. This place could be the envy of every doomsday prepper. Shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Franklin Roosevelt feared that Washington could be bombed next. The Presidential Emergency Operations Center, or PEOC, was built in 1942. Under the East Wing, the underground bunker was designed as a secure command post, hardened with steel, concrete, and blast doors to survive direct attacks. Accompanied by the Secret Service, the president can reach it quickly from the residence through lifts and secure stairways, 40 to 50 feet below ground. Inside are conference rooms, communication systems, independent air filtration, and emergency power. It has been expanded several times, notably during the Cold War, after 9/11, and again in the 2010s. Each upgrade added new technology and greater depth. Not all, but some presidents have used PEOC during security drills and crisis simulations. As for real situations, Franklin Roosevelt used it during World War II air raid alerts following Pearl Harbor in December 1941. Bush and Cheney famously sheltered there on 9/11. Despite Trump's denial, he was taken to the bunker during the 2020 George Floyd protests near the White House.
Cheney's in the bunker isn't real or a drill. They're flying toward the Pentagon, the White House, the hill.
Tear it down. Ever been in that creaky old house and fear the next step you take might go through the floor? For President Harry Truman, that was a very real fear. The late 1940s showed that the White House floor sagged, walls cracked, and crystal chandeliers swayed ominously when someone walked overhead. One evening, Truman heard a loud crack and rushed upstairs to discover that his daughter Margaret's piano leg had broken through the floor of her sitting room. "The damn place is falling down," Truman exclaimed, but it wasn't a joke. Engineers confirmed that the mansion's structure was dangerously unsound. In 1948, he ordered a complete rebuild of the interior at a cost of about $5.7 million, roughly $76 million today. Crews gutted the house down to its sandstone exterior and rebuilt it around a steel and concrete frame, adding all the latest innovations. The interiors were reconstructed to look as before, but not precisely so. The original staircase and the Lincoln bedroom were relocated, and the servants' rooms were eliminated. While the Trumans lived across the street in Blair House for nearly 4 years, Truman found a way to honor what was gone. Through the Truman Renovations souvenir program, pieces of the old structure, beams, paneling, nails, and floorboards were turned into keepsakes and gifted to museums and the public.
When you are Harry Truman's grandson, you take piano lessons. And it was during one of these sessions that my mother told me the story of her piano in the White House. The leg of that piano punched through the floor of her sitting room into the family dining room below. And that's the first I heard of the condition that the White House was in 1945.
Chess, not checkers. As commander-in-chief, many presidents didn't have the luxury of a control room to monitor battles as they unfolded. When President John F. Kennedy ordered the creation of the Situation Room in 1961, it came on the heels of embarrassment. Just months earlier, the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, a CIA-backed attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro, had unraveled with bad intelligence and outdated communication. Kennedy vowed never to be caught off guard again. Abraham Lincoln had sat up all night nearly a century before in the War Department's telegraph office, reading the battlefield messages as they came in Morse code. That room was the 19th century version of the same idea. A president informed of the events as they happened, which made all the difference. Kennedy's Situation Room revived that urgency. Located on the ground floor of the West Wing, it was a windowless room filled with maps, teletypes, and secure lines. Of course, the technology and equipment in the room were upgraded over the years. We had a glimpse inside during the 2011 bin Laden raid. In 2023, the Situation Room received a $50 million upgrade, its walls once again rebuilt for a new era of seeing conflicts unfold.
The Situation Room experience is incredible.
Wonderful.
Extraordinary.
Phenomenal.
Intense. Amazing.
Transformative.
Powerful. The Situation Room experience is the ultimate team-building exercise.
The West Wing and the Oval Office. The Oval Office in the West Wing is one of the most famous rooms on Earth. It's been recreated more times than any other set in history. The West Wing, House of Cards, and Independence Day, just to name a few. But few realize it wasn't part of the original White House at all. The West Wing was built in 1902 by Theodore Roosevelt to move the president's work out of the family's quarters. William Howard Taft added the first Oval Office in 1909 and modeled it after Washington's bow-shaped reception rooms. Then, on Christmas Eve 1929, disaster struck. Faulty wiring sparked a blaze in the chief clerk's office, and flames tore through the West Wing. Even President Herbert Hoover rushed from his holiday party to help firefighters carry things out. The Oval Office was gutted. Although it was rebuilt, Franklin Roosevelt found it inadequate for his expanding New Deal administration. In 1934, FDR ordered it demolished and replaced with a larger version, doors opening onto the Rose Garden.
You can't imitate gold, real gold. There's no paint that imitates gold.
So these aren't like from Home Depot or something?
No, this is not Home Depot stuff.
No, not stuff you buy.
This is not Home Depot.
Smell the roses. Long before it was fit for photo ops, the lawn beside the West Wing smelled of hay and horse. In the 1800s, this area was the White House stables. Then in 1902, First Lady Edith Roosevelt cleared the barns and vines, planting formal lawns on either side of the mansion. One would later become the Colonial Garden. In 1961, Jacqueline Kennedy and designer Bunny Mellon redesigned the garden with a defined central lawn bordered by flower beds, suitable for entertaining large groups. Here, Ronald Reagan welcomed the 1985 World Series champions, the Kansas City Royals, to the White House. In 2020, the garden received a facelift with stone walkways and simplified beds. This year, President Trump paved over the grassy lawn with stone tiles that resembled the outdoor patio at Trump's Mar-a-Lago Club, turning it into an exclusive place to host fancy dinners with his friends, and renamed it the Rose Garden Club.
You will never see me hit another puck again, as long as I...
Massive Ballroom. By now, we've learned that President Trump can do pretty much what he wants with the White House. The East Wing of the White House was built in 1902 and expanded in 1942 to include the offices of the First Lady, the White House Theater, the Kennedy Garden, and various administrative offices. Trump demolished the East Wing on October 20th, 2025 during a government shutdown that denied oversight, without formal approval from the National Capital Planning Commission. After 3 days, the entire 90,000 square foot structure was leveled. It will be the future site of a new, huge $300 million ballroom. According to Trump, the project will be financed solely through private donations, but hosting the parties will be a different story.
You are in the calligraphy office of the East Wing of the White House, and right now we are working on the Queen's visit on Monday.
There you have it. Did we miss any other changes? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, watch another one. Have you ever wondered where the house you grew up in came from? Here is the surprising history of the suburban house you grew up in.